Well, hello, that's me again. Today is the November 27th. It's a Sunday, and we have something very important to talk about. And this is also against the background of this scandal with Balenciaga, which was basically caught in exploiting children, which is basically pedophilia practices, and this is absolutely not surprising. And let me kind of give you a little bit of the introspective and the retrospective, because I spoke about this issue of pedophilia permeating the Western elites. This is not to say that they're just Western elites, but it is in the combined West where the pedophilia and everything related to it completely permeated the top echelon. As I wrote in my last book, and I wrote quite a bit about that, we cannot obviously paint with a broad brush everybody who is in the political elites, for example, in the United States or in the Western Europe, but obviously the number of people who are pedophiles or leaning towards the pedophilic activity and all kinds of general abuse of children is very large. And that's why I will make a little bit of a retrospective here today, because I spoke about this before, but I need to concentrate this more because obviously there is a huge cultural war happening right now between Russia and the combined West, in which Russia defends the traditional family and biological values, which actually is in the Russian constitution, that obviously the family is a man and a woman and children, which are given the normal, primarily biological birth. Of course, there are many cases of man and a woman family, which is a foundation of human civilization, adopting obviously children from other families or abandoned children. So, and this is one of the driving factors behind the hatred of the combined West towards Russia, because basically Western elites are pedophiliac in a very large degree, and all kinds of the alternative lifestyles, alternative being, of course, in quotation marks, and obviously Russian law, which is have been adopted recently. Actually, there was one adopted before, and now there is another one which completely forbids any kind of the alternative style propaganda in Russia, especially against children, which is defense of the family, and the State Duma adopted this law. And of course, this infuriated pretty much all this kind of the elites, so to speak, in the West. But we have to remember that while pedophilia is not limited only to the West, there is even pedophilia in Russia, which is, of course, being hunted. Those people are hunted down. They immediately arrested once, things become known, and then, yeah, you throw them into Russian jail, and their life expectancy is not very long. But here's the issue. When we talk about this, we need to remember who modern European and Western in general, and some American so-called intellectual and creative elites are. And let me remind you something, and you can read it in my latest book, and I've been outspoken on this for many years. And now when we have the Balenciaga and this cultural war against Russia, because precisely Russia supports and defends classic family, which is the foundation not only of nation but human civilization, here's what we need to talk about. And I want to remind you again, here's what is happening right now. And Russia obviously responded immediately to the United States. That's basically the statement of about the statements of numerous U.S. officials criticizing the bill. We consider such statements as gross interference in our internal affairs, the diplomatic mission said, adding that Russia consistently stands for the protection of traditional family values and rejects attempts by Western states led by the United States to impose pseudo-liberal and perverted ideas about human rights on other countries. So I'm not going to go there right now into all those issues of the basically Western psychiatry and things of this nature. This is for the scholars to argue, and per se, I have nothing against, for example, gays, because, you know what, as long as they do whatever they do, it's in their private thing, you know, whatever they do behind the closed door, it's their own business. But whenever the issue comes up about children, well, that's different, my friends. But here it is. And basically, I want to remind you again the thing where it basically started in Europe, for example, although in the United States it existed also for a while. In 2001, The Guardian basically spoke about the fact that, well, calls for legal child sex rebound on luminaries of May 1968, the famous so-called revolution in France. Well, when the time passed by enough and many people who were main drivers behind this so-called revolution, which some people argue was the CIA operation against de Gaulle, but who knows, it doesn't matter at this stage. So we have this. They speak about the people who basically were pedophiles. For example, the petition issued by one of a number of the so-called French intellectuals, Bernard Kouchner and Jacques Lang, among the signatories. It was the petitions were used after a 1977 trial that saw 3 men jailed for non-violent sex offenses against children aged 12 and 13. 3 years in prison for caress and kisses. Enough is enough, one petition signed by Mr. Kouchner and Mr. Lang said. So, poor dear. So they just merely caressed and kissed basically 12 and 13-year-old girls. And we need to recall what also The Guardian started to write about this. And here's very important. French law recognizes in 12, 13, and 13-year-olds a capacity for discernment that it can judge and punish. Basically, wrote those people, one of those people, and in one of those petitions wrote there by the French so-called intellectuals, said a second petition signed by Sartre and de Beauvoir, along with the fellow intellectuals Michel Foucault, Roland Barthes, Jacques Derrida, a leading child psychologist François Dolto, and writers Philippe Solers, Alain Robert Grelet, and Louis Aragon. So, okay, yeah, that's your basically French intellectual elite. All of it, without exception, postmodernist, pseudo-communist, pseudo-Marxist, but look at this, what Mr. Cohn-Bendit. Now, an MEP for the French Green Party, Mr. Cohn-Bendit, why I'm not surprised that he is from the Green Party, has been severely embarrassed by the resurfacing of an article he published in 1975 about the erotic nature of his contacts with children at an alternative kindergarten in Frankfurt, where he lived and worked after being kicked out of France for his part in May '68. Well, look what he writes. Certain children opened the files of my trousers and started to tickle me, he wrote. Mr. Cohn-Bendit has insisted that the passage bear no responsibility, that passages bear no relationship to reality, that he has never been a pedophile, and that the article taken from a book, Le Grand Bazaar, was a product of its time, of our anti-authoritarianism, pure provocation designed to shock the bourgeoisie. Well, you know what? I may not necessarily be the World Economic Forum supporter, but if you want to shock bourgeoisie by means of basically performing sexual arts, acts with children, I think so. The jail is one of the best things which you can face. There are other methods to deal with this, including baseball bats. But here's your basically level of people in the United States. Roman Polanski, he screwed 12 or 13-year-old girl, but he's so talented. That's the kind of people who occupy the many positions in the top political and creative top, and obviously journalists and all kinds of things in the United States and in the West. And this all started in 1968 in France with this fundamentally bizarre thing, of course, which is was this famous The Age of Consent petition signed by, if you look at the list of signatures, all kinds of people who never held a real job in their life, who operate with the bullshit they invent by multiplying essences, and they call themselves philosophers, and, like Derrida, or like Sartre, who calls himself a communist. I mean, in Soviet communist times, he would have been basically killed for what he was preaching for. But here it is, that is a famous uh, discussion and petition, which is, of course, the dangers of child sexuality. And there's Michel Foucault talking to other people about the fact that, and here it is, look what they conclude. When someone says that the child pornography is the most terrible of present scandals, one cannot but be struck by the disproportion between this child pornography, which is not even prostitution, and everything that is happening in the world today. What the black population has to put up with the United States, for instance, this whole campaign about pornography, about prostitution, about all those social phenomena, which are in any case controversial, only leads to one fundamental presupposition. It is worse when children are consenting, and worse still if it is neither pornographic nor paid for. Wow, this is, guys, the psychology and worldview of those people. And basically, those people are the core of the intellectual France, for example. And they, in many respects, actually projected or expressed the views of many people today in political and creative top in Hollywood and, of course, in France. And then you wonder, well, I'm not going to talk about Germany. Germany is a whole other level of perversion. So for them, they begin to compare apples to oranges, speaking about, for example, the fate of blacks and racism, which was pretty obvious, obviously, especially in 70s in the United States, unlike it is today. So, but here we are, and then suddenly they compare, okay, so that we have the black population in the United States, which still did much better than most of African population, make no mistake, and which actually held, majority of this black population holds this truth absolutely normal and organic, that you cannot harass children, for crying out loud. You cannot abuse this. And then they compare this to the, oh my gosh, child pornography and child abuse. Well, there you go. This is not even the logic. And these are people with, don't forget, they are philosophers and intellectuals. And this is the point which I write for many years now. There are no real intellectuals left in the West anymore. And most of them started to basically die out precisely in the 60s on the wave of the counterculture. And French were definitely leading the world here. I guess when you're losing your status as the global power and, your culture begins to diminish and you begin to lose everything, for example, to Anglo-Saxons. And then, of course, you have to take flights, to at that time at Salyut, Soviet space station, by Soviet, spaceships. Yeah, the only thing which is left for you is obviously the football and, basically projecting and installing, if you wish, and promoting absolutely bizarre and criminal practices, and call it intellectualism, because basically anybody who read Derrida or Sartre, Nekrasov, I was sleeping already after 3 pages of reading this complete bullshit by Sartre and many others, but hey, they are intellectuals, right? But that shows you that the level of intellectual in the combined West today is all primarily about satisfying their sexual urges, much of them perverted, and that is why they are obsessed, for example, with Lolita by Nabokov, which is actually, I read both in Russian and English, and let me tell you, this is not really the incredible work of art only for those people in Hollywood who want to, basically act it out, because it covers their desire to be close to children. Of course, they find all kinds of rationales and justifications for that. You know what? Main justification being artistic freedom and, trying to act out, or one of the greatest book ever written, which of course it never was, and this was scandalous. And fact is, I do not consider Nabokov even to be that great of a writer. Some things here, people read about it, and, it's okay, I guess, so, but nothing genius there. And that is why, you have the situation with Lolita being the, center of all attention, with the rest of the writing, including his writing, or Nabokov's writing, about Pushkin, which people say, oh, look at this, he wrote about Pushkin so much. Well, who cares, really? of course, French intellectuals. But this is what I wanted to tell you today and open my conversation to you on this issue, because it is extremely important, and we are facing now civilizational struggle, the cultural struggle. And because of that, the United States and combined West failed to isolate Russia, and this was one of the major factors, because majority of the population of the earth doesn't share all those perverted, let alone pedophilic views and alternative styles which combined West tries to impose on the rest of the world. And in Russia, they see not merely a military defender, but also defender of the fundamental civilizational values and culture. And most cultures in the world, they view exploitation and abuse of children as pedophilia, as crime. Unless, of course, we talk about Afghanistan with its famous tradition of bacha-bazi, the dancing boys, and, basically, boys being used as the sexual objects. But that's a separate topic, obviously. So this is the part of which I needed to talk to you about today. But let's talk about something more, especially because, obviously, there, as a special military operation continues, and now Mr. Prigozhin is the founder of the Wagner group, is now evidently at the FBI front at least. But Mr. Prigozhin actually shocked everybody 2 days ago when he stated that actually there is a British battalion in forces in Wagner group which fights in Ukraine, and some people say, yeah, he probably, just pulling the finger, trying to mislead people and do the misinformation campaign. Is it possible? Possible. But truth is, there are many international volunteers who fight on Russia's side. Many of them are from Western Europe. You know what? And Mr. Prigozhin dropped the bomb when he stated that one of the former generals of United States Marine Corps is actually commanding this, what is called British battalion in Wagner group. And could it be the misinformation? Could be. But what is my opinion about this? I think so. He's not lying. I think so. He means what he says. But this is another story. But while everybody talks about how Ukraine is basically begins to live without the electricity, soon it will begin to live without heat and things of this nature, and somebody, I'm not going to be calling their names, are coming to their senses when for months they have been explained that a Russian strategy is very different and not what you think it is. And we can see now that Russia is basically, it's it's doing the regime change in Ukraine. There are obviously now, after all those triumphalistic bullshit spread by the Western media until, I would say, probably September, when the basically reality begins to dawn on them, and they even write things of this nature. You can sense the panic there, which is absolutely expected. And here we are. For example, New York Times is crying out that artillery is breaking in Ukraine, is becoming a problem for the Pentagon, and Ukrainian troops fire thousands of explosive shells at Russian targets every day using high-tech cannons supplied by the United States and its allies. But those weapons are burning out after months of overuse or being damaged or destroyed in combat. Well, first, if anybody tells me that M77 is high-tech and that, for example, digital ballistic computer which is attached to it does not exist with Russian artillery, I mean, you know what, you cannot really explain to people who write this shit what actually ballistic computer is, how it's digitized, and how you can use the even good old, flip phones with their processing power to provide the ballistic tables. But yeah, they need to tell about high-tech M77 and then 105 caliber 105 millimeter cannons is high-tech. It's like everything comes out of the West is high-tech. No, not all of it. In fact, is M77 sucks as the gun for a simple reason. There's a lot of aluminum in it, and there are also the issues with the laners of the barrels. So, and they are not designed for real war. So, but hey, at least they now begin to admit this because you cannot hide this anymore. I mean, and if you look at the basically all kinds of their uh, press and media in the United States and elsewhere, you will notice that the sense of panic, and they are openly now, be that Pentagon or even NATO, or anybody who has some brains left there, they talk openly that, yeah, we're run out of weapons. And fact is, and although they say, oh, there are still some main, countries in the West, especially some like United States, Great Britain, they still have some stocks left. No, they don't really. I mean, they have some weapons left, but that is correct. They cannot anymore send them to Ukraine. First, they are completely alien to the Ukrainian armed forces or whatever's left on them. So they will need to have those cadre officers and lower rank personnel attached to them. And yeah, they just simply ran out of it. Raytheon cannot even increase the basically production of the Stinger, which was a flop, huge flop. And you can sense this desperation. And again, now that Ukraine is facing real war after Russia basically kills its energy network by the missiles which Russia ran out of in May or March, I don't remember. Russia should have ran out of them long time ago. There are all kinds of BS is being propagated, but they cannot really hide anymore the reality of this. And here's the other thing which I wanted to point out to you. I mean, there is a guy, Alexander Mladenov, he writes for all kinds of the aviation things, so to speak, And I was yesterday at the Barnes & Noble, and I picked up the air combat, or combat aviation, or whatever the hell those bullshit magazines, and this Bulgarian dude, he graduated University of Sofia with the degree in mechanical engineering, and then within an year, I believe he got some kind of certificate from Bulgarian School of Aviation, Air Defense and Artillery, whatever that means. I don't know how you can teach anything militarily seriously for a year, but hey, he did it. And he wrote in August this absolutely, I mean, it's amazing how much crap goes, around, but look at this. Here's the guy who writes this in August. Oh, the Russian military has failed to conduct effective suppression and destruction of enemy air defense, SIAD-DIAD, operations in Ukraine, and has hit strike operation. Alexander Mladenov explains. And here is the issue. The guy writes all kinds of those booklets from the Osprey publication. It's booklets about this, for technophiles and hardware masturbators who, like MiG-21 or Mi-24, this is the thing, and this is how the tactics of it have been performed. It's difficult to explain for people with that background, and especially from the small country of Bulgaria. Make no mistake, I'm not trying to diminish Bulgaria, but for crying out loud, look up the Bulgarian armed forces, be them in Soviet and Warsaw Pact times, or especially today, with no functioning anything pretty much. So I don't know what value they're basically studying in this their Levski military academy is, which is basically probably some kind of, I don't know, so what do they study there, what kind of background they, are provided, but obviously Mr. Mladenov had the background which is zero in real serious operation. Obviously he never studied operational art, he never studied serious tactics, especially tactics with the modern and advanced weapon systems, and he basically writes about those, masturbator articles about, things like hardware, and of course he basically spews bullshit, which is, I believe his phone is on the speed dial to Kiev, but boy, talk about being absolutely wrong. Obviously, the people, they are brought up and educated, quote unquote, by NATO instructors. And for Mladenov to continue to publish his BS, obviously, he needs to stay in the game and basically spew the NATO BS, while in reality, we can see basically what is happening in Ukraine right now. And as I already stated, Mladenov and people of his ilk who probably learned how to fly the what's the name of it, Cessna or some kind of light aircraft, they better really get involved in the studying what actually military science is, because obviously for the graduates, even of the respectable uh, engineering profession of the mechanical engineer, and they don't teach those things there. Not to speak, of course, that Mr. Mladenov wouldn't have the idea about even the Soviet level air defense, not to speak about the fact that United States wouldn't do much better, actually, if it should have fought the density and basically distribution of such air defense as was in Ukraine from the get-go. And again, S-300s primarily have been suppressed. Some of them are remaining. It is not that. It is Buk M1 and even ASAS, which are the main danger for the Air Force. And the Russians dealing with this pretty well. So, and my suggestion to Mr. Mladenov, before he writes another crap about something he has no clue about, he should concentrate writing about the older aircraft and, you know, make those colorful booklets and study, for crying out loud, what real tactics and operational art and how it manifests itself on the especially mathematical models, and how the forces are calculated and how the tactics is adjusted. But evidently Russia is doing okay in suppressing enemy air defense. But again, try to explain to Mr. Mladenov. But this is what I wanted to tell you today about, because it was important. I couldn't stay away from this Balenciaga scandal and, of course, this gigantic, titanic cultural battle, which now between West and the rest of the world, which begins to manifest itself, be that in Balenciaga and pedophilia issues too, something like this Mr. Bulgarian dude, whatever he, you know, his scholarship, again, his background in military is zero, or near zero, maybe in some sense even negative. So they try to accomplish by basically spewing propaganda, but they know the outcome and they are desperate. And we can see the outcome forming and shaping as I speak to you guys. So as always, please, those who like what I do, support me on the Patreon or buy me coffee, guys, and subscribe to my channel. And I'll be talking to you later, and have the nice rest of your Sunday, guys. Bye-bye.